Spirituality is revolutionary in its entire setting. The fabric of spirituality is dynamism, and therefore, genuine practice of spirituality is described as one which can bring about a tangible transformation. In the purports to Srimad Bhagavatam, it is described that the message of bhakti is so powerful. The message which is given in Srimad Bhagavatam is so powerful that it can convert, or it can transform a crude man into a pure devotee. A crude man is like iron. A pure devotee is like gold. So it can transform iron into gold. That is the power and the efficacy of the process of bhakti. So each and every injunction of the process of bhakti is very powerful, extremely powerful. And many times, even the touch of spirituality can bring about such a massive difference in a person's life. Such a massive difference in a person's life. Even the touch of spirituality. So each and every injunction is like that. The Bhagavad Gita begins, and the ABC of Bhagavad Gita we find the knowledge of the science of soul. Now we may say, okay, we are not the bodies, we are the spirit soul. We have heard it many times, and we are going to hear it many more times. But this one simple statement can make so much of a difference in people's lives. I believe some months back I was narrating to all of you the story of one of our teachers who's giving a class on science of soul. And there was a fat lady who was attending, and she was so fat she was not fitting in the chair, and she was some sort of half fit. She was not able to get in, she was not able to get out, that kind of situation. Very fat, very obese, suffering profusely, suffering. And in this session, our speaker was introducing, you are not the body, you are the spirit soul. And as soon as he said that, beyond all limitations, beyond all inabilities, you're not the body of the spirit soul. The body is Asat, Achit, Nirananda. But the spirit soul is Sat, Chit, Ananda. It's eternal, full of knowledge, Chit, Ananda. The body is opposite. And the speaker saw this lady had got hyper excited or hyper active. She was trying to get out, but she was not able to get out of the chair. And throughout the lecture, she was in quite an exciting mood, and our speaker was fearful. And at the end of the lecture, she just jumped out. I mean, she could get out of that third that of excitement was so much that she just exploded out of the chair. And she dashed toward the speaker, and the speaker's heart was pounding that, my God, she gives one tight stab, we finish. Such a hefty lady. And she came, she caught the hand of the speaker, and she started moving it up and down, saying, thank you, thank you. And the speaker was very nervous, she was perspiring. He thought, I don't know what happened. She got offended. How is she was reacting, about to react violently. But then he heard the words, thank you. He was soothed. Oh, it means something positive. Okay, fine. And this lady was thanking. Why? Because right from her birth, she was facing this disease, obesity. And because of that, she was a misfit everywhere. She was not fitting in. The clothes, the clothes sizes was a misfit. The shoe size was a misfit. Uh, the in no, the chair size was a misfit. The bench size was a misfit. And in her age group, she looked like auntie, you know. And in elderly people say age group, she was still a child. She was a misfit everywhere. And today, after so many years and decades of her life, she is hearing that she is not this dirty, dingy, limited body. And that was so comforting for her. Just the thought, the idea was so nice. And this is not just an illusory idea, this is the reality of existence. But just hearing it brought so much of joy to her. That's the point. What to say of one who is working hard or who has realized that he is not the body he is? He is living on the platform of the soul. How much it can bring about a difference. So we will see that the differences, the dissensions among people are because of this bodily identification, bodily differentiation. When one understands is not the body, the differences cease to exist. Like one time, two of Srila Prabhupada's disciples, very senior devotees, they're sannyasis themselves now. And one of them is a Jew by his ethnical background, not ethical, ethnical backgrounds. And the other one is a German. And they were actually outright rivals. I mean, the World War scenario and all that, you know. So they were outright. And here was Radhanath Maharaj and Sachinandan Maharaj. One is Jew, one is German, and both of them are chanting and dancing together, the best of the friends. Why? Because they have strived a relationship beyond bodily barriers, understanding that they are part and parcel of Krishna. This is the spirit soul. The other person is the spirit soul, beyond the body, beyond the body. So actually, in America, the blacks were being mistreated very badly. You know, so there was this movement also by, I believe, Martin Luther King for the rights for the black. I don't know whether it was called the civil war. I mean, there was a war on that, and there was a big movement of that actually in America. The blacks, the rights of the blacks, Afro-American blacks, the blacks was a big movement actually. So the American were being, I mean, the blacks were being mistreated actually. Now, one of Srila Prabhupada's very senior disciples, very great devotee is Bhakti Tirtha Swami. So he was an Afro-American, and Bhakti Tirtha Swami he was brilliant. He was amazing. He was brilliant, and in his academics, in his he had a very powerful career in front of him. Bhakti Tirtha Swami, he became a devotee. So now he had gone through this discrimination, the racism throughout his life, being a black, an Afro-American, you know, the white and the black and all that. Anyhow, these kind of racism, tremors are all over. In Australia also it exists. 10 years back it was quite rampant. Now it is dampened, but still you can find some droplets here and there. Racism against Indians. Interesting. So he had suffered that. So now when he became devotee, then in the temple also, there were other devotees. Now many of them were Americans, like that, the white, the so-called white skin and all that. And he was facing the same kind of maybe a bit mitigated because now they were devotees, but they were all very young in their Krishna consciousness. So he was facing that kind of racism within the temple also, and he was feeling very much bad and disgusted. So he So he went to Srila Prabhupada. He was quite annoyed. He was quite broken-hearted. He was quite hurt. He went to Srila Prabhupada. He asked him that this is how devotees are treating me. What should I do? Should I give a tit for tat back? What should I do? And Prabhupada made a very important. Prabhupada gave a very insightful statement. Prabhupada said that you see, they are making a mistake being in bodily consciousness. But if you retaliate back with the same mistaken worldview, then what is the difference between you and them? And then if you have understood the philosophy, then how can you deal in that way? If you can understand, then your behavior should change. And you should not behave in the same way. That means, and if you behave in the same way, that means you are still thinking that you are the body, the black body, the white body, and so on. And Bhaktivedanta Maharaj took this to heart. Therefore, he was an abode of love and compassion for all devotees. Bhaktivedanta Maharaj. Obviously, he did massive preaching in the United States. He did massive preaching. He was preaching to political leaders in the United States. Very powerful. He did massive preaching in Africa. He was the official counselor for many African governments and the presidents. Many African nations gave him the best citizen award. Like in India, there is Bharat Ratna, like that. Sort of. So that is B.D. Swami. Very amazing. But then the point is that I am not the body. That knowledge itself should bring about so much change. Then why should I be bothered about the titillations, the pampering of the body? So this knowledge is not at all theoretical. It's not like, oh, we are the spirit soul. Okay, no problem. Now I've understood. Let me go to sleep. Let me watch a movie. No. This knowledge is not at all theoretical. This knowledge, the knowledge comes with knowledge comes with that gunpowder, with that ammunition of call for action. Yes, if you are not this body, then why are we wasting our lives, just pampering this body? Then one should lead a simple life. Do the needful for the body, but aim high on the spirit, not plane of the spiritual plane. So immediately many things start following up. Is it not? So therefore the knowledge is very powerful. One time, one of our spiritual teachers writes in an article he was sharing. Ravindra Swarupu, he is very intellectual devotee, Prabhupada's disciple, very nice. So he writes, one time he was driving in America, and he had to catch an appointment. He was getting late, and he was speeding up because he wanted to go far. He wanted to reach on time. They follow that culture. On time means on time. Not that on time means half an hour late. That may be the Indian matrix. Okay, half an hour late means on time. 1 hour late means okay, little bit late. Almost made it. Not like that. So he was rushing. But lo and behold, to his utter dismay, he found himself caught up in a traffic jam. It was a deadly jam. Now, mind it, this is not India where jams are every now and then. This is America. There are not traffic jams and usually there are no such things like that. The management systems, the organization is superb. But anyhow, at that moment he found himself caught up in a traffic jam. And because Americans don't expect traffic jams, they were the most irritated because it was a dead jam. Dead jam actually. He was not able to move at all. And he was saying actually everybody is banging their horns and everybody is looking with sullen eyes and and with irritated faces. Waves of dissensions moving around, irritation and heat was building up. And Ravindra Swarupu was one among all of them. And he was also looking very critically on the faces of others and questioning, what is this? And people are giving choicest words of glorification for others, for the government, everything actually. So that was the scene now. That was the scene. And then all of a sudden, Ravindra Swarup was most miserable. But despite anything, he was not able to solve the problem. Because what can you solve if your car is deadlocked in the midst of a jam and it is going to take hours to resolve? So all of us, and he was miserable, and he had no other option. But all of a sudden, a reminder came to him. Hey, what am I doing? Who am I? Immediately, a thought came to him. I am a devotee of the Lord. Is this the right way of behavior, or can I do something better? As soon as this thought came, then he understood, hey, why am I cribbing? Why am I critical, cribbing, speaking, bad mouthing here, everyone, anyone, and most miserable. I'm simply wasting my time. Can I do something better? And as soon as the thought came, then immediately he could, focus his thoughts, and then he switched on his music, and he started kirtans. And when he started kirtans, and he was clapping and chanting. And he was clapping and chanting Vaishnava songs, he was singing kirtans, he was singing, completely absorbed. Now, and immediately found himself being levitated to a different plane in which there is no cribbing, there is no irritation, there is no heat and all that. And it is as if he was liberated. And then in due course of time, the traffic jam resolved, so he went. So the point is that the knowledge of spirituality, the knowledge that yes, I am a part and parcel of God, is very powerful. And this knowledge can bring about a great difference in our activities. That's how powerful the knowledge of the spirit soul is. Now, see, the irony of this world is that if you try to analyze, this body is beyond our control. Beyond our control. We don't know how the various mechanisms of the body are functioning. We eat food, we don't know how it gets digested. Sometimes we eat food, doesn't get digested, that also we don't know. We don't know anything. How the aging is happening, how the growth is happening. Many times people don't want to fall sick, and when they don't want to fall sick, that is the time they get sick. The body is out of our control. It's just like somebody is telling, "Oh, this is my car," no? And people say, "Oh, this is your car, very nice, very sleek car. Now come, let us go for a drive." And he say, "Oh, you want to go for a drive?" So what happened? Your car only, na? Huh? My car. What is the problem then? Let's go for a drive. He said, "Yeah, it's my car. Only problem is I don't have the keys. I'm the driver." So when it comes to this body, our scenario is same actually. We say, okay, I possess this car, but we don't have the keys. When we want to remain healthy, we'll fall sick. We don't want to age, but we age again. We want to be in high mood on many occasions. Exactly at that mood, the mood goes down. Is it not? So we don't have the keys. We want to remember something, outside of the examination room, fully will remember. We go in the examination room, the pen and paper, question paper comes, forget. The answer paper is taken away, again remember. Beyond our control. We don't have the keys. Beyond our control. So what is the point in simply getting drowned in the quicksand of bodily consciousness? So that's the point. The bodily consciousness is like a quicksand. And what is the point in getting drowned in this quicksand of bodily consciousness? And therefore, actually, one's activities should be more meaningful, more tangible, and more meaningful. That is the point. So that is the reason Why the knowledge of the spirit soul is so important? Because it opens up doors before us. It opens us avenues before us, dimensions before us, actually. Everything starts becoming so sublime and so deep, amazing, actually. This is the reason why we see from time immemorial, people have been eulogizing the idea of the reincarnation and the scientific story. Philosophers have been talking about it since the cradle of civilization. Just like, for example, Franklin says that okay, so what you're seeing is a book with an old cover. He's speaking to himself in his old age, speaking about himself in his old age. This is an old book now. I mean, it has an old cover. But don't worry, the new edition will come soon. Or Carl Jung, he makes a statement. Carl Jung is a great philosopher. Makes a statement that the content of the book, just like there is book, the book is not important. The content of the book is what point. He says, okay, in the same way, the body is not important. The book, the paper, and the hard binding. But the content of the book, that is important. So therefore, the body, like the paper, hard binding, and all that, that's not very important. But the soul is the content. The soul is it. Because the activity, the characteristic, the proclivity, the habits, the behavior, that shoots from the soul. Shoots from the soul. Oh. Okay, so it seems to break up the text here, the PPT. Sorry for that. But actually, so what's written here, the reincarnation means the process of coming into flesh again. Yeah. Yeah, so just like a user may change a broken bicycle for a new one, similarly, an old body is exchanged into a new one. Yes, old body is exchanged for a new one. Yes, in the Greek, uh, uh, the Greek philosophers have given so much insights about the knowledge of the soul. Here is Socrates. I'm confident that truly there is truly such a thing as living again, that the living spring from the dead and the souls of the dead are in existence. And therefore, Socrates, when he was about to be hanged because of the conspiracy done by envious people against Socrates, he was completely unaffected, unagitated, because he said that now the people who were about to hang him were feeling very miserable, and they were saying, "Why are you smiling and why are you fearless? We have never seen a person like this. We have seen a person, being being in a very in a most frightened state, in a very helpless state. We have seen that helplessness, that fear in the eyes of people just before they die. But you are completely fearless. Why is it so? What happened? I mean, why is it so? How are you like this?" And Socrates said, "Don't mind. You cannot even touch me. What to say of killing me?" Or Socrates. Yeah. Yeah. So according to Emerson, the human body is a temporary abode, and it passes from one habitation to the other. Yeah. Carl Jung. I could well imagine I might have lived in a former centuries and there encountered questions I was not yet able to answer. And then that I have been born again because I had not fulfilled the task that was given to me. Yeah. Okay, so I believe Franklin Benjamin Flackman, he says, okay, some shape or the other, I will always exist. The souls, after revolting against the Supreme Being, are hurled down into regions of darkness. Yeah. Okay, before we go into this, sorry. Okay. Other philosophers in the Greek history also have eulogized the knowledge of the soul. Pythagoras acknowledges that he remembers his past life. One time, in his book Xenophanes, he writes that he saw a puppy and he was about to beat the puppy, but then a realization dawned on him that this puppy was my past life, was my friend actually. So, and then his friend had died, and then he could see his friend in the puppy, so he resisted his friend. He said, "Okay, this is another life, the same person, the same person." And Pythagoras is to say, because of the sensual desire, the living entity has fallen from the abode of God. And the first birth is a human birth. But then he says people who are gluttonous and people who are drunkards, they'll become asses. People who are violent will become wolves, hawks, wolves. Blind followers of social customs, they'll become ants. And then slowly everyone will get back the chance to get a human body. This is the philosophy of this was the philosophy of Plato. So Plato gave this philosophy that okay, that according to activities you will get your next body. So many Greek philosophers. Now this philosophy is being, this understanding has been revealed in the Bhagavad Gita very precisely and very elaborately, uh, very explicitly and elaborately. But yes, even the Greeks were able to understand that. Every religion talks about reincarnation. Now, Mr. Really? Come on, is it? And that's true. To dig into any single religious text, it talks about reincarnation. For example, Christianity. Now we may say, okay, the Bible explicitly the talks of reincarnation are not there, but although explicitly is not there, implicit references there everywhere. Right? In Matthew, now in the Matthew section, Matthew talks about so there is this big question actually that Elias, the great saint, will come back. Elias will come back. Elias will come back. Where is Elias come back? And Matthew says yes, Elias has come back as John the Baptist. And also, if Elias has come back, and Elias was a past life saint, and he has come back, then what is that? That means reincarnation. One time, the disciples were asking Jesus, "This person is blind by birth. I mean, is he blind because of his sins in his past life, or the sins of his parents? Why is he blind?" They are asking this question to Jesus. That means they all had an idea and they all had a belief and faith in the process of reincarnation, actually. In the process of reincarnation. If you study Christian history, we can understand that, it's a documented fact in Christian history that the references about the soul and reincarnation were the references about the soul and reincarnation were omitted and manipulated upon explicitly in the history of the biblical evolution, or you can say in the history of the Christian culture. So it was the year 527 AD, and there was the Emperor Justinian. Now, Justinian thought that this philosophy of reincarnation will make people a bit lazy because people will understand that okay, they have many lives. Okay, इस बार नहीं तो अगली बार निकाल लेंगे. Let me chill out this life next life I will, rock it. So let me lead a sinful life this life. Next life I will maybe repair. Because okay, if there are multiple chances, maybe I'll take the next chance. So he had a thought that okay, why to give next chance, and that will make people complicit. Let us tell them that you have only one chance, and that's how the one chance idea has become prominent. Okay, only this life, and then the day of damnation, or what is that decision? Eternal damnation or eternal stay in heaven. So that's why, so now Justinian, therefore, actually, he took away, he got all the references of about the soul, omitted from the Bible, actually. But even though they tried hard a lot, that some remnants are still remaining, and that those are the references that we have. There are many references, actually, in Bible. Not explicit, but many references are there which do point about our identity as a soul. But you can say all of this was done by Justinian, and he was like overwhelming emperor, and then he had the power to do that in those days. But we find that still, even today, there are so many sects amongst Christians. By the way, Christians have around 40,000 sects, actually. Yeah, around 40,000 or so divisions among them. So there are many sects among Christians who not only believe, but they propagate the idea of reincarnation. There are many sects, like the Gnostic sects, the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, the Kabbalists. In all of their teachings and their scriptures, the idea of reincarnation is very strongly and prominently present. Similarly, in Islam, many Sufis have written poems like Jalaluddin Rumi. He writes, and you were dead and you were born from the dead. And Jalaluddin Rumi is telling that what is the problem? I was a plant, I became an animal, then I became a human. I have nothing to lose because I am getting human life back and nothing to lose. Talks so explicitly about reincarnation. So there's a researcher Browne into religious studies or Islamic studies. And he says that actually in Islam there are three types of transmigration of the soul being talked about. One of them is called as Huhul, Huhul. Huhul means a periodic return of a saintly person. Then there is Rijat. Now, Rijat is an immediate return of a very important spiritual leader, Rijat. And the third one is an ordinary reincarnation of normal tiny puny souls like us, and that is called as Tanasuk. So this means Islam is filled with understandings about and acceptability about the knowledge of the soul and reincarnation. Similarly, we can even look at Buddhism. Now, Jataka Tales is a very interesting book in Buddhism, and it describes 547 lives of Buddha. They claim it as lives of Buddha. What are those lives? Past lives. Yes. So, uh, how Dalai Lama is choosing generation after generation. It's uh, uh, it speaks about reincarnation, acceptability about reincarnation. Actually. So they say that actually there is a Buddhist scholar, researcher. He says that actually in the body of knowledge called as Theravada, reincarnation is a very essential doctrine. So he says that actually reincarnation is not omitted from Buddhism, but actually reincarnation is considered to be a higher level science, and therefore the first level people are not introduced to it, but they become more serious when they are introduced to it within Buddhism as well. Then Buddhism talks about the Four Noble Truths, which say that okay, suffering exists, and the suffering is universal. Suffering is all pervasive. It talks about the cause of suffering, how to get out of suffering. When you say suffering, cause of suffering, how to get out of suffering, then one is talking about karma. And if you talk about karma, you're talking about reincarnation. You talk about reincarnation. So in this way, we will see that the mention about reincarnation is there all over the scriptures. All the religions are talking about it. All the religions are talking about it. Even scientists talk about it. So we had seen some months back about the past life memories in children, out of body experiences in children. Okay, let's go over to the slideshow. Here we are. Seems it's to be incarnation PPT. Okay, there is some issue with the slideshow. It seems. Yeah. We'll get back to the slideshow sometime. So we were discussing the past life memories, the research of Dr. Ian Spitz. We discussed the case of a small girl. Her name was Shukla. The daughter of K. N. Sen Gupta, living in Kampa in a village in Bengal. And she would always keep talking about a place called as Bhatpara, which his father never knew about. And of her identity being an elderly lady, having a small daughter, and so on. Mana, Minu. And she used to keep calling out Minu, 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 seemingly the daughter name. So once K. N. Sen Gupta was discussing this issue, initially he thought it is a childish play, but then he thought it is looking a bit serious. And what is this Bhatpara? And his friend Esipal, he knew this place Bhatpara. He said, yes, it's there on the map of India. The train goes there. You can go and visit there. So he took his family, he took his daughter. As soon as they landed in Bhatpara, his daughter was running. She led the way to home. He reached the home. And then she was trying to enter at a and she was a little worried. She was trying to enter from the side, looking the side, like that. But there was only the wall. There was no door. And then she saw an old man. She became very shy, and she greeted that old man. And then as they turned, then she led everyone inside the house, and she said, "This is my family." So this small girl, Shukla, was narrating her being, in her past life, a lady called as Mana, who was the wife of Haridhan Chakravarti. She recognized her father-in-law, mother-in-law, their relatives, fine details, unknown details about their family. Her daughter, they had a daughter, Minu, and that daughter. So that daughter Minu was now around 16 years old, and this 5-year-old girl, she was cajoling, caressing her head and crying tears, my Minu, 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 like that. Just like a mother would do that. So, and there are other details. She, knew the nicknames of the real brothers-in-law. Like there was the one brother-in-law was Ketu, but his actual name was Kshetranath. Even the neighbors are not knowing. So Dr. Ian Stevenson, like this, has studied 3,000 cases in his 30 years of past life memory career. Now, we were also speaking about that just like there are past life memories, there are past life phobias. Suppose a person died in a certain way in his past life. Now, this life, he has a phobia. Like somebody died of, say, somebody died of, say, water. So then he has a hydrophobia. As soon as he sees the water, even if it is a child's swimming pool, he'll start perspiring, start fainting, or something like that. Similarly, somebody died in a stampede, he has claustrophobia. So this is what Dr. Ian Stevenson did. So he had made his a system that okay, a child should be less than 5 years of age, and a child should have he should be able to recall at least 50 incidents from past life. So the instead not only past life memories, then there are past life phobias, and he could also find past life birthmarks. Suppose a person was killed with a bullet on his chest, and now this person is and now there is a child who is reclaiming or who is claiming himself to be that person who was killed with a bullet. Then when the bullet hit, according to postmortem reports, the location in the body, after Ian Stevenson found such a child who is claiming to be that person who was killed, he has a birthmark at that exact spot, which according to postmortem should be the place where the bullet was hit. Birthmarks. So now when this research was presented initial days, people had people raised a good number of questions, which Dr. Stevenson and many scientists doing past life memories they discussed. So the first objection which comes up is that maybe this is the first suspicion which comes up is that okay, we'll have the slideshows there on the slide. The first suspicion which comes up is that okay, it's an imagination. It's imagination. A child is simply speaking something in imagination, and it's just by fluke that the imagination clicked to be a story. Sometimes people say, okay, I imagined of a person, such a person actually exists. Just like sometimes you saw in movies, no, the person is a novelist and he is writing a crime drama, and he's imagining a person is killed in this very unique way, and that is he writing in a novel, and then he comes across that okay, a murder incident happened in that way. So this may say, okay, this is imagination by fluke, or by someone, I don't know what. It is becoming true, astounding, but what can be done? So maybe the child is speaking something blah blah, and that blah blah comes out to be a proper description of some human being somewhere. So the objection will be raised. Now, to eradicate this objection, Dr. Stevenson says that he has researched 3,000 cases, and he's not the only scientist researching in that area. He's not the only scientist researching in that area. If you see the amount of books which are published in past life memories, there's so many scientists. So over 3,000 cases. So and they often historically, so they are now telling that these children are pretending to be people who are historically very specific people who died before these children were born. Though it's quite unlikely that with so many thousands and thousands of cases, could just imagine something and speak something blah blah. Next, the next suspicion which was raised by psychologists was cryptomnesia. Cryptomnesia means hidden memory. So basically, the objection was that no, generally sometimes children, they have very sharp ears, they put their ears everywhere and keep listening. So the child is listening a lot of information here, there, everywhere in the newspaper, TV, uncle, auntie, father, mother, everybody. And then what happens is that then all these things are going into the memory, and inside the memory actually, or specifically say, all this, so some sort of this kind of information becomes like a khichdi, and sometimes this khichdi pops up and pops out as some storyline which the child is speaking. So she might have heard something about somebody dying in some village, and she might have heard about something and something and something, and she's speaking something. Cryptomnesia, hidden memory. So therefore, this refutation say that okay, memory is a past life and mere memories of something one has heard, here and there. Now the refutation which Dr. Stevenson gives us, uh, Shukla is a very small girl, and she is not recollecting the past life incidents under some hypnosis. This is a usual awake consciousness. There is no hypnotic regression which is happening there. So Dr. Stevenson says even if we accept that it is cryptomnesia, cryptomnesia is about information what one has heard and one is making a khichdi out of it unconsciously, and he's just uh, vomiting it out, or she's just ejecting it out. But that's not the case with Shukla, because she is not just speaking information. Shukla is recognizing people. So she is able to recognize people. Now, this recognizing people one cannot hear. One can only hear, okay, there was a village Bhatwara, there is some respectable man, Keynes and Gutka. Like these kind of things one can hear. The house is very near to the railway station or something like that. But these type of things one can hear. But who is that Sen Gupta? Who is that Haridan Chakravarti, Amritla Chakravarti? How do you know that? Shukla recognized 30. She recognized her daughter who was, past life daughter. Now to auntie. So who's 16 years old? So by the time Shukla, now suppose Shukla in her past life as her mother of that Minu, then Minu would have been only few years old, 2, 3, 4 years old. Now she's 16. How was Shukla able to recognize? That is the point. That is the point. It's not just information; it's recollecting people. And another refutation which comes with that, okay, maybe this is or another suspicion or objection which comes with that, maybe this is ESP, extrasensory perception. ESP, extrasensory perception means that people who have this extrasensory perception, they have a radar, some sort of antenna, a subtle one. And the radar actually they can zoom on any place, and when they zoom on any place, they can see whatever is happening at that place. So then the scientist said, no, the Shukla had some ESP, uska kuch to radar hai, and she actually put herself in Bhatwara, and then she saw all this. Now she's bringing everyone, and then she's showing. So now there was a specific incident in the whole episode. The incident was that the Shukla, she was trying to make everyone enter the house from the side where there was no door. And Shukla was quite confused for a very long time till she saw her father-in-law. Till she saw her father-in-law. So then this question was asked by Dr. Stevenson. And what was it? Why this girl was perplexed in the entrance? Then actually the family members, they said yes. The previously the entrance of the house was from that side where Shukla was searching. But after her death, we closed that, and now the entrance is this. And that's the reason Shukla was confused, because she was not knowing the way to enter. Because what she knew, the door was the door was 90 degrees to where it was now. Now, if it is radar, then Shukla would have been able to see, this is the entrance, so that is the entrance. Why she's getting confused? So this is not a case of ESP, extrasensory perception. So in this way, Dr. Stevenson very clearly and distinctly points out and builds up this point that the past life memory is not the case of this past life memory is just not made up, cooked up. It is a genuine reality. That's the point. That is the point. So in fact, science and medical history has not just stopped at this point. It has gone even further. There is an anthropologist, Erika Burgonian, and she says that actually there are 488 cultures in this world, and 437 of these cultures accept reincarnation. Interesting, no? Now, just like there is research in past life memories, similarly there is research in out-of-body experience. And actually, doctors have become startled. Like, say, for example, we hear the very interesting case of Dr. Michael Stabub. He started his journey out of a contempt for this OBE, and in an attempt to blow it off, explode it, eradicate it, he jumped into it to prove it. Now, Dr. Stabub, he is an ardent promoter of OBE. He said, actually, my research, I got convinced that yes, this exists. This is out of body experience are existing. So there are so many interesting cases. Dr. Kenneth Ring narrates an incident about the out of body. So out of body experience is basically a person who is just about to be near death or something, and then his operation is going on, he's on anesthesia and so on, and then he comes out. He says that he has seen what was happening to him from a position outside the body. Who has gone outside the body? Now we can, if you understand the soul, we can say very easily who has gone outside. This is the soul. Now it's okay, if the soul has gone out of the body, then how is he controlling the body? So just like we can control a laptop with or a mobile with Bluetooth, similarly the soul can also use Bluetooth technology to have some control or remote control or whatever you call it as. Or we can write algorithms. So the auto boot algorithms, the spirit soul can also write that way. So Dr. Kenneth Ring speaks about cases of out-of-body experiences when the person who was being operated was actually blind. But when he came out of the operation, then he's narrating that he saw what was happening to his body. And the doctors were just not able to believe it. This person is blind, how can he see? The body is blind, the soul is not blind. The soul went out and saw everything, took photographs. And then he came back and he told, hey, I saw everything, how you were, in such a, in such a careless way doing my operation. I saw everything like that. So this is the point, actually. And amazingly, this is not the end of it, actually. If you study medical history, there are facts which can startle our brain substance, which can puzzle us, which can be mind-boggling and intellect exploding. How is it happening? How is it possible? But yes, it is possible. It is documented. Medical history is very interesting. There are many cases in medical history. So there is a researcher, Dr. David Iceberg from the Harvard Medical School. And he speaks of a narrative. He speaks about a case what he had encountered with his own eyes of two Chinese girls who were blind. And he said there's no vision. But the astounding fact was that they were able to see with their armpits. Armpit. Armpit, anything comes, this is okay. Wait. Abhi dikhai de raha hai, barabar. Able to see with their armpits. In Italy, Cressera, there are cases where people were able to see with the tip of their nose. Blind man, able to see with the tip of his nose, or the lobe of the ear, like that. Similarly, in Soviet Academy of Sciences, there is this recorded case of a peasant Rosa. She was blind, but she used to be able to see with her fingers. If you give her text, she'll move her fingers, she'll read what is written in the text. Not braille, normal text. And now we may say, what is this? But this is medical history. Welcome to medical histories. So these cases have been recorded in very reputed scientific research institutes like Harvard Medical School, Soviet Academy of Sciences, and so on. And this is completely perplexing. And it'll blow up one's intelligence. What is happening? Actually, is it the eyes which see, or who sees? So it's not the eyes which are the eyes. Then what are the eyes? And what are these eyes? And what are the actual eyes? That question should come. That's the point. Yeah. Some weeks back, I remember in Science of Soul, we were giving some cases of person not having, that cerebrum, cerebellum, oblongata, medulla oblongata. So I mean, they wanted to understand what special gray matter he has. They did a CT scan. They found out he has no gray matter only. So extreme tougher action like that. There are these very interesting cases actually. But the point is that you see now how is it possible without the gross eyes one can see it. This goes to show that what we see, the body, is all hardware. What we see as the body is all hardware, and it is the software which drives the hardware. And the hardware is not present, still the working may not stop. Just like suppose, okay, now we may use a computer or a laptop. Now we are using a computer laptop, then the computer laptop is making our life easy. But someday the laptop is not working and the computer is not working. We can still work. It may be a little inconvenience, but we can still work. That is the logic. That is the logic. So it is the spirit soul who actually sees using the instrument of the body. That's like, in every place CCTV cameras are there. So the person who is inspecting the building, now he is seeing as 20 cameras are all over, and then he's seeing movements at every strategic location of people. So that is hardware. Now suppose if certain area camera stops functioning, becomes dysfunction. So now the camera starts becoming dysfunctional, then there is inconvenience, but then still somebody can do. I mean, something can be done. The person can himself walk into that area and see if everything is all right or not. Exactly. You can always walk there and see. You can always walk there and see. So in this way, we can understand that they just like there is so there are these gross eyes, then there are subtle eyes, mind, intelligence, ego, and then the soul has its own spiritual eyes. So that's how it is. Another thing what we can understand is that interpretation and fixity is all a matter of programming, because this hardware component is programmed to the processing of the vision. Therefore, this hardware component is active. Tomorrow we program another hardware component. That means instead of eyes here and something else in the body, then that's how that perception will start happening. That perception will start happening. So therefore, it is the spirit soul which is most important. That is where the operating system lies. That is where the system level commands can happen. And therefore, if any hardware here and there is topsy-turvy, doesn't matter. The spirit soul can drive it still like that. The spirit soul can drive it. So this knowledge this knowledge, this understanding, when it comes to the science of soul, when it comes to the science of reincarnation, one should meditate upon it time and again. And if you meditate upon it, it creates a sense of urgency. What am I doing? I'm wasting my life. Srila Prabhupada says that just like when you are in class 10th, you should start thinking about what after 12th and you should start preparing for it. Whether you want to become medical or engineer or JEE or AIMS or NEET or whatever. No? And if you don't prepare, you will land nowhere. You will pass out, but then you won't land anywhere else. Similarly, one is doing engineering, then no, he should start thinking of some job. If he doesn't prepare, then the engineering will pass, but the poor fellow will not have any job. He'll be roaming around like a vagabond. So one has to prepare for the future. And therefore, Prabhupada says this human life, one should prepare for his next life. If you do not prepare, the default settings will work. As similar to what Plato is describing. If one sleeps too much, will become polar bear. If one doesn't wear clothes, he will become a tree. Okay, stand without clothes. The whole year long. And so on. So on. So it should evoke this sense of urgency in people. And let me not waste my life. Already what is done, but now further life, let me not waste. Let me become serious in my spiritual life. Let me become serious in my spiritual life. So you see, there is no fun in the material world. Rather, it is only sweat and toil. A person foams in the mouth, he's fuming in the mouth, he's shedding his sweat and toil. But there is no gain. It's just like there are material world at best offers us titillations. These titillations are a very big spike, and that is what is advertised. You see such a big spike, you will enjoy a lot. But they never say that this spike will only last for a few milliseconds. They never say that. Now, even if it is a spike going till infinity, if it only lasts only some microseconds or milliseconds, then the magnitude of the spike doesn't matter. The integral is always going to be very limited. Yeah, a delta function goes to infinity, its integral is 1. So even if you say that material world has given me infinite success, infinite, but it is only few milliseconds. 4 दिन की चांदनी फिर अंधेरी रात. और 4 दिन का इंटीग्रल इटर्निटी पे लेंगे तो 0 आता है. और कभी कभी गलती से 1 आ गया तो अलग बात है. Is it not? But what are we going to do with that 1? Is it not? This is the problem. So this is the point actually. Therefore, actually, scriptures are speaking. I believe in the Greek scriptures, there is a story of Sisyphus which comes. So the Sisyphus was a god, I mean, the Deva, the demigod, the Devata. He was one of the Devatas. Roman or Greek, I believe. I think maybe Roman, yeah. Yeah, in the Roman, maybe. So he was one of the Devatas, Sisyphus. And Sisyphus was actually, he made a mistake, he was punished. His punishment was he had to take a big, stone, a big sphere, a rock of stone, and he had to push it till he reaches the top of the mountain. Top of the mountain. A lot of effort, and he would push it, and he'll reach at the top of the mountain. The superintendent there would say, "Okay, you brought it at the top," and he would just kick the stone, and it will go rolling straight down naturally. And I'll say, "Okay, go and pick it up again, bring it up again." Again, he'll bring it. Again, this fellow will just kick, and then again the stone is rolling. These huge rock boulders. So Sisyphus was a fighter. He was like Kshatriya, and this was the punishment. He had to do that on and on and on. On and on and on. So material sense gratification is like that. owing to sensual desires, actually, one takes that big stone of whatever greed, lust, and then and one is again back down with that big load of greed and expectation. So therefore, let us not waste our human energy in bodily consciousness. I remember I was in my second year of engineering in IIT Kharagpur. We were there in LLR hall, and we are in second year. In second year, computer science, the first interface actually. Computer science is very rigorous. The training, the culture is very rigorous. We used to get assignments, typically 3 subjects on assignments. One assignment would take 60 to 100 hours, 2 weeks, tenure, and we would be really. I mean, it would be a fortunate day when we will sleep. I remember the exam days, the midterm exam would be the happiest days of our life. Why? Because there was no assignments, and actually we could get, and I could get some 6, 7 hours, 8 hours of sleep. I would sleep the most during the exams, whatever, because other times you won't get that much. Exam time would be really cozy. Huh? I can properly sleep. We obviously study, but there was no. Yeah, doing the assignments used to cover a good amount of course, so we were prepared for the exam. It was not it was not a non-prepared case, like that. So therefore, the exams were fine. But I remember this was the time where devotees, many devotees, they were wanting that I should become serious and spiritual, and but I was too attached to computer science, and I would say yes, yes, I have a heart for spirituality, but let me finish a couple of programs, and 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 I would sleep at 1:30 and I would get up at 5 o'clock. That was my schedule. Day and night, coding, 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 coding. Like that. It was bad after. So I was not becoming serious, and I knew that, and I wanted to be, but I thought, okay, maybe there are many other priorities. Uh, and I knew that I have become a little dhila, but then I was thinking, it's okay, but the programming fervor should not go dhila. That should not go down. Yeah, like that. So, so, so that's what I remember. And then I remember one day I was doing an I was in the afternoon, I was sleeping, evening I got up. I did some puja, Jagannath, Baldev, Subhadra, Shri Radha Govind. In my room I had some pictures. I did some puja, offered some fruits to them. And then I sat down to work. I took with those fruits I ate as prasad, and then I sat down to work. And the computer I was coding and all that, all of a sudden the computer, sort of shut down, and I was wondering what happened, what was the mistake. So I had some knowledge. I opened, no problem and all that. So, anyways, the fault part is another story. But no, but the important point which I wanted to make was so when I opened, I mean, it was I was in second year, and then we got the desktop in first year, like that, and that was I think I got two just before the end, first semester. So we got it in discount because IIT KGP alumni had sponsored. All of us got in discount like that. We were, I mean, it was quoted that we will get it in 5,000, but then some business breakdown happened of some of these alumni, so we got it at 18,000. Actual cost is around 25, 30,000. We got it at 18,000, 16,000, 18,000. Anyhow, so so it was not that old. And then I saw actually opened the desktop, I mean the desktop, cabinet, CPU cabinet. Then I saw on the motherboard, just on that Pentium processor, there was a this big spider, this big spider, this big legs, like that. And I was wondering, ye kahan se aa gaya, and he's looking very ferocious and wild. Yeah. This small tiny puny spider who you can do, and he will be flying. This one was a real big, his legs were also, very black, dark, and you know what this fellow was doing? This fellow was doing like this, like this. He was sitting, standing, like this, like this. Oh my God, with my eyes wide open and the mouth wide open, I was just watching him for minutes and minutes. I was watching. And this fellow was doing like this, like this, like this, like this. He was just sitting on the Pentium in the motherboard. And for minutes and minutes, I was watching. And I don't know what happened. I mean, I never got to see what happened. It was it was not a small time episode. Actually, it was a very serious, and the whole vision was dark, and I was so horrified. My God. Because I was not able to tolerate seeing Dr. Mayank Bhasin, on top of Pentium and doing like this, like this, like this, like this, after hundreds of publications, after whatever awards and all that. So, so this is the point actually. Therefore, there's a nice story which comes, which makes a point, which punches on the point. Uh, which is just like we'll end with the story. A big, huge fort. We just want to circumambulate the fort. It will be kilometers of walk. And this fort, and then there is a Kedi, Kedi, and this fellow is kept in prison from long time. And then it's okay. You have one chance. We are having you solve the puzzle, and you can be liberated. I mean, you can get out. So what is the puzzle or the riddle, or then they play a riddle on him, and they say, okay. So the soldiers, they blind cuff him, so he's not able to see, and they put him towards the interior boundary, internal boundary of the fort walls. That means next to one of the walls. And they say, okay, this fort has hundreds of doors. All are locked. But there is one door which is open. If you can find that, you can get out of it. Liberation and victory is yours. Enjoy the four directions. Is it not? And this fellow is blind tough. So what is he going to do? And he's very meticulous. He's scanning. His hands are moving. He's scanning. Okay, is there a door? Is there a door? And he's moving like this along the wall. And minutes pass by, and hours are passing. This is kilometers. Boundary, huge fort. And a long time passes by. The person getting tired. The hot, scorchy sun. The barefoot. Parched up, no water to drink. Hungry. But he's trying. He's trying. He may be crying. His heart is crying, but still he's trying. And then it's just about to come to that door. Near that door, many doors he found which are closed, which are locked. Big lock. This big lock. The Shahi locks. And now he's about to come to a door which is open. But all of a sudden, when he's just about to touch that door area which is open, a mosquito comes, and the mosquito is buzzing in his ear. And then he takes his hand off and is removing the mosquito. But he puts his hand back. All this time he was moving, and the door is gone. And now he has to do the full round again. And again he's just coming. just next to the door, which is which is open, and he's just about to touch it, but all of a sudden he gets an itch, and then he misses the door because his body is moving, the legs are moving, and again he's just able to come. But by this time he's so tired, and just before that door, he removes his sweat, he gasps for air, and then he again puts his hand. The door is again gone. So the import is that this big fort is the Sansara, Chakravyu of the Sansara. That big fort, the Durga Devi as the fortress. And these doors are various types of bodies, but all of them are locked. The animal body, plant body, this body, that body. But there is only one door. If one takes benefit of that door, and one can get out of this Chakravyu forever. That is the human body. So therefore, in human life, one should be most serious about spiritual affairs and most serious about spiritual life. Because this is the only chance we have. But while one is there on this, while one is on the human drive, if one simply itches, or if one simply shoos off some mosquito, we get troubled by perspiration or mosquito or itch. So like this, we get troubled by these tiny puny sensual provocations and disturbances, some relationship disturbance, some tiny puny provocation, and we miss the goal of human life. It is a big fort. After hundreds and thousands of lifetimes, again the opportunity will come. Therefore, therefore, an intelligent person should be determined. This life, I should awaken my spiritual identity. No more game of going in this Ferris wheel. The cycle of miseries. Birth and death, the cycle of miseries. Crying all the time, dying all the time, and crying all the time. No more dying all the time. No more crying all the time. Let me take the spiritual life in that fervor. That is the calling of the science of reincarnation. That is the calling. That is the level of seriousness which is expected from a sincere, from a sincere student of spiritual science. We'll stop here. Thank you. We'll continue again in our next class. Hare Krishna.